Shambhu, yeah.
Yes, we have started the recording.
Okay. So a very good evening to one and all. Today's session is on topic antimicrobial stewardship by Dr. Ankur Gupta. And this session is going to be moderated by Dr. Shoibal Mukherjee. So let me first begin by introducing the moderator, Dr. Shoibal. He has over 30 years of experience in drug development and pharmaceutical medicine and has headed the medical and research departments in Pfizer, Ranbaxy, GVK Biosciences, and Quintiles Asia. He is the founder and the first president of the Indian Society for Clinical Research, or ISCR as we know it. And currently, he is an independent consultant with assignments in tropical disease, biologicals, vaccines, and phytopharmaceutical research across the pharmaceutical research industry and medical startup domains. So I welcome Dr. Shoibal. He shall be moderating this session.
Thank you, Shambhu. Should we begin the session then?
Yes, sir.
So good evening, everybody. It's great to have all clinical pharmacologists on the group here. And my very warm welcome to Dr. Ankur Gupta. We are looking forward to his presentation on antimicrobial stewardship. It's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Gupta to you. Dr. Gupta is Regional Director, Medical Affairs for Menarini Group, which is, I understand, an Italian pharmaceutical group. He is responsible for Asia Pacific and Singapore for medical affairs. He, as far as I understand, he did his medicine from Amritsar and then did his MD in pharmacology from CMC Ludhiana. Thereafter, he's been with the pharmaceutical industry and with the healthcare industry in general, and he's quite an expert on antibiotic use and antibiotic stewardship. He's actually presented dozens of times and talked about and helped organizations with antibiotic stewardship. He's got 13 plus years of experience in medical affairs and medical marketing. He has expertise in infectious diseases with focus on antimicrobial resistance. He's delivered more than 350 lectures on rational use of antibiotics, on PK/PD of antibiotics, management of multi-drug resistant bacterial infections, invasive fungal infections, and so on and so forth. We greatly look forward, Ankur, to your presentation this evening. I understand that you're based in Singapore, so this must be later in the evening for you. So welcome once again, and please begin your talk.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mukherjee. Getting introduced from a stalwart in the field of clinical pharmacology is such an honor for me, sir. When I joined industry in 2007, we all used to look up to you, and this one of the dreams was to become like you. So it's a great day for me that I am participating in a session where you are moderating. So yeah, I did my MD pharmacology from CMC Ludhiana. Dr. P.P. Khosla and Dr. Dinesh Badyal were my teachers there. Yeah, so thank you so much, sir. Okay, so I have spoken about antibiotics in the last 14 years a lot. And today, Sunday evening, late evening, talking on antibiotics, there is a perfect recipe to fall asleep. You know, antibiotics is generally considered such a boring topic, that also on a Sunday evening. But I would like all of you to not think of it like a lecture, but let's go to the journey of antibiotics. This is a very fascinating journey, I can promise you. This class of drugs has saved the maximum lives on this planet even till today. WHO did a survey that which was the biggest discovery of the 20th century, the medical discovery. Anyone, which was the biggest medical discovery of the 20th century? So the number one was X-rays. and the number 2 was penicillin. Okay. Among drugs, it is still considered one of the biggest discoveries of the 20th century, the last century. So, but look at the destiny of these antibiotics, that exactly after 100 years they were discovered. The first antibiotic, penicillin, to be used commercially was in 1941 in the World War II, when there were soldiers which were dying of the gunshot wounds which are caused by Staph aureus, and there was nothing to protect. Okay, and that's when penicillin, which was a chance discovery by Fleming, had to be produced in bulk. And at that time, my erstwhile company Merck, gave free dozens of penicillins, and it went out of stock. And the first death, the guy who died because of lack of penicillin availability, was also called Alexander. He just had a thorn brush. He was passing through his farm, and there was a rose bush and there was a thorn. Just from a scratch of a thorn, that led to Staph aureus infection, and he could not get penicillin in time. So you can imagine those days. And now WHO says that by the year 2040, it's a real scare that we may be entering a post-antibiotic era. So just within a gap of 100 years from a pre-antibiotic era to a post-antibiotic era. And I think post-COVID, the way we have used doxycycline and azithromycin during COVID, I'm sure if you see now their resistance rates, they must have shot over the roof. Okay, so that's the reality of our time. So let me just share my screen. Okay, so it's a very interesting story how I got into antibiotics. So when I finished my MD, my first interview was in Ranbaxy. Dr. Poras Irani was my first boss. So he asked me, he said, I was very interested in cardiology. I thought I have to do something in cardiology in medical affairs. So he said, there is no position open in cardiology. The only position we have is in antibiotics. And I was so dreaded of antibiotics. In my MD also, I only knew the names of 5 antibiotics. And in the entire infectious disease chapter, we used to study only malaria and tuberculosis, because we thought long question jo hai 40 number ka wo usi mein se aata hai. Right? So the first question he asked me in my interview was, what are ESBLs? And at that time, I did not know whether this is a pathogen name of a scientist or something. So that is how my antibiotic journey started way back in 2007. And since then, literally, I have been eating, drinking, sleeping antibiotics. So the thing that you dread the most in your life, you have to face that. Okay. So that's how my journey of antibiotics started. And then I had the good fortune of working in antibiotic stewardship. In fact, last 10 years, 2008 to 2018, we were the first group to tell hospitals that, look, how to do antibiotic stewardship in a resource limited setting. And that is what I'll be focusing today, because if you look at the IDSA guidelines, European guidelines, they're all for the Western scenario, where in one hospital you have 10 infectious disease physicians, clinical pharmacists, epidemiologists to help you. In whole of India, we have less than 100 ID physicians. How many clinical pharmacologists are there in the hospitals? Clinical pharmacists in India are only dispensing powers. They don't have prescribing, or they don't change the prescriptions much. So I think we have to customize our own model of antibiotic stewardship, and that's what I'm going to focus today. Okay. Just a disclaimer, since I also belong to a pharmaceutical company which does have some antibiotics, but in today's lecture, I'm speaking in the capacity of just a pharmacologist, and there is no conflict of interest. Okay, resistance. So I think when it comes to resistance, one of my teachers, Dr. Camilla Rodrigues, who's a clinical pharmacologist from Hinduja Hospital, Bombay, she says a very interesting line. When it comes to resistance, question is not if, question is when. Okay. Resistance is a byproduct of antibiotic use. Like you drive a car, there is pollution. You cannot prevent it. You can reduce it. Similarly, antibiotic resistance is a byproduct of antibiotic use. The more you use them, the more you lose them. Now, the question is how rationally, how judiciously we use them. Okay. I recommend this paper to everyone. I think this was a landmark paper by Jim O'Neill. And see the irony, Jim O'Neill was an economist with Goldman Sachs Bank. So the world did not listen to a scientist who were shouting from rooftops for the last 20 years that, look, resistance is the next pandemic. But the then British Prime Minister, David Cameron, he asked Jim O'Neill to write a review on AMR. And this paper came in 2014, and he said that by the year 2050, if we do not do anything about AMR, 10 million people might die, which will be more than diabetes and cancer deaths put together. And this will impact the world GDP by 2 to 3.5% with a loss of $100 trillion. And we all know money speaks. And when this paper came, I have seen the transition, how in 2008-9, when we used to say antibiotic resistance, the guys in US and Europe used to tell us, look, this is the third world problem. This is not a developed world problem. And when this paper came by 2015, 2016, the whole world started talking about antibiotic resistance, so much so that in the last 3 or 4 UN General Assembly sessions, there have been dedicated sessions on antibiotic resistance. So I think sometimes when you put resistance in terms of monetary commercial numbers, it does make an impact. Okay? And very importantly, this was a WHO 2017 report said these are and they divided the pathogens into critical, high, and medium priority for which we need antibiotics. And the 3 biggest critical priority pathogens are CRAB, which is carbapenem-resistant Acinetobacter baumannii, carbapenem-resistant Pseudomonas aeruginosa PA, CRPA, and CRE, carbapenem-resistant Enterobacterus. And you won't be surprised that India is a world champion in all 3, unfortunately. Okay, just see the resistance list. And this data I have only from 2015. I'm sure we have crossed this. Look at this MRSA, methicillin resistant staph aureus, our resistance rates are 50% plus. Now, this is very important because earlier we used to think India mein gram positive nahi hota. Gram positive is a problem of West. In India, we mainly have gram negatives. That is true. But even our gram positive resistance rate is 50% plus. But we don't consider it as a major issue because gram negative is 80% plus resistance. But our MRSA rates, that means no penicillin will work. The only drug which will work is vancomycin, teicoplanin, and linezolid. Okay, we have 50% plus resistance rate of MRS. ESBL. In the history of antibiotic resistance, this is a superstar. This is the most successful resistance strain. It first came into being in 1981 from a German girl, Timo Niera. After that, we called it TEM, which was its variant. And now it has spread across the world. And we are undisputed world champions. Our ESBL rates are 80% plus, irrespective of metro cities or smaller cities. And what do you mean by ESBL? ESBL means no penicillin, no cephalosporin will work. Drug of choice is carbapenems. Just imagine, and the most common pathogen which produces ESBL is E. coli. And E. coli is your most common community-acquired pathogen. Just imagine the scenario: a newly married female comes to you with honeymoon cystitis, is having lower UTI caused by E. coli, which is carbapenem resistant. You may have to give a carbapenem to this young lady, right? This is the scenario that we are facing. Our community ESBL rates are 40% plus. We have reports from Kanpur, Nagpur, smaller cities as well. So this is a problem pathogen. And this is the biggest, the villain these days. CRE, carbapenem resistant Enterobacterus. Klebsiella and Acinetobacter. These are the 2 biggest havocs in the ICUs are today. Our Klebsiella resistant to carbapenem rates are also now 40-50% very easy. Acinetobacter resistant to carbapenem is 80% plus across the globe, right? Other than some islands, Australia, Scandinavian countries, Canada, where resistance is less. But otherwise, this is the scenario. Okay. So I think in India, I call this antibiotic anarchy. Our hospitals are not conducive to protocols. You know, some people say in India, we don't follow evidence-based medicine. We follow eminence-based medicine, right? Very few ID physicians who are qualified, multiple prescriptions, and I will show you so many irrational combinations we have, FDCs, combination therapies. Pharma industry is to be equally blamed. I mean, we have, if you look at MIMS or SIMS, there are more than 150 brands of meropenem or piptazole, from 250 rupees to 2,500 rupees. Now, what is the business of a pharma company selling a meropenem to a GP? I have seen prescriptions, GPs prescribing meropenem for typhoid fever, 500 mg BD, wrong drug, wrong dose. Okay, such indiscriminate promotion by pharma companies, and that is, and there's no surprise that we are an antibiotic anarchic nation. And antibiotic is automatic. We did a project that let's see the discharge summaries of 100 patients from any hospital. And I can tell you 80% of discharge summaries will have an antibiotic along with an antacid or a multivitamin and maybe a painkiller. This is the level we have relegated antibiotics to. Okay. So in this scenario, is there any light at the end of the tunnel, or as Navjot Sidhu says, the light at the end of the tunnel could be of an incoming train? Okay. If we do not heed anything, it could be of an incoming train. But I am an eternal optimist. I do think, yes, antibiotic stewardship is the way to go. And before I go into the nitty-gritties, I think simply to what is antibiotic stewardship? How we use them, how we choose them, when to stop them, and when to switch them. These are the 4 catchwords that we have to remember for antibiotic stewardship. Okay. Okay. Use. First of all, very important, as we all know, we are all doctors. The first, our responsibility is not to cause harm. I think the first thing we have to teach people is when not to use antibiotics. Okay. Any prophylaxis which goes beyond 24 hours ceases to be a prophylaxis. That means you're actually treating for it. Okay. Has the source been controlled? Very important. If you have an abscess, you keep on giving antibiotics for eternity, it will not be healed unless you drain the abscess. Dose and dosage adjustments, and I will talk a little bit about this because we are all pharmacologists. This is a very important D, how to manage the dose. Okay, because now we know there are time dependent and concentration dependent antibiotics, and it's not just a theoretical concept, it has a clinical implication, how to dose them. Fluoroquinolones and aminoglycosides should be given single shot high dose. I always say gone are the days when you give amikacin 5 mg or 10 mg per kg BD or TDS. The right dose of amikacin is 1 gram once a day single shot. Okay, it does not cause nephrotoxicity because nephrotoxicity depends on the trough levels, not the peak levels. So if you give one high dose, the trough levels are less. Okay, rather than giving more frequent doses. Similarly, I say it's a crime to give levofloxacin 500 or 250 mg for a pneumonia. The right dose for levofloxacin is 750 mg single shot. So I think it's very important to know the dosage of this. Timing, again, septic shock, first hour is the golden hour. If you miss this, mortality is much higher. There is a lovely paper by Kumar from Canada that every hour delay in starting an antibiotic in a septic shock patient increases the mortality by 7%. Okay, so it's very important you have to know when to start them. And of course, prophylaxis. Now we say when you induce the patient, give the prophylaxis. No need to give 24 hours or 12 hours before. And single shot. For most cases, single shot is good enough. There are some occasions when you have to give a second or a maximum third dose for 24 hours. Okay. Otherwise, you do not give antibiotic prophylaxis beyond 24 hours for most of the surgeries, including knee replacement, hip replacement surgeries as well. Okay. Coming to choosing. Now, the pathogens for your pneumonia are totally different from pathogens for a urinary tract infection. So unless you are suspecting a source, I don't think so you should give an antibiotic. It's very important because ciprofloxacin, carbapenems can treat everything from head to toe infection, but that's not science. You have to first make your provisional diagnosis that where is the likely source. And then based upon that, use your empirical therapy based upon your hospital data and the patient's comorbidities. Okay, then the spectrum. Now it's our definition in India of a bada antibiotic and a chota antibiotic is, it's very perverse. People think levofloxacin is a chota antibiotic. It covers almost every pathogen that carbapenem covers. So I think it's very important to know what is the spectrum. And in every case, bada hai to behtar hai is not right. Okay. Penetration. Okay. We all know aminoglycosides penetration in lung is not that great. Whereas some other antibiotics like amoxicillin or augmentin, even if sometimes the culture report shows intermediate or resistant, if you're giving for a UTI, it penetrates 1,000 times more than the serum concentration. Therefore, it might work. So these principles are very important. This is the role of pharmacologists, to judge, to see, to read the culture reports and then interpret which antibiotic will work and which will not work. And drug or drugs. In India, there is a fashion of giving 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 drugs. So that doesn't help. Okay. Another concept which is coming up these days is when a patient is serious, parenteral is essential. Now, these studies have shown the sooner you shift the patient from IV to oral, faster is the recovery. Lesser are the chances of hospital-acquired infection, lesser are the chances of prolonged stay in hospital. Okay. And I am a very big votary of this fact that we have to know how to read a culture report. I think if we are a pharmacologist or anyone who is placed in ICU does not know how to read a culture report, I think that's a dereliction of duty. It's not just microbiologist's job to tell you, if you get a report at 2 a.m. in the night, suppose, okay, I'll give you an example. Suppose you get this report at 2 a.m. in the night, patient is sick, this is E. coli. Can anyone raise the hand and tell me whether you think this is an ESBL E. coli or not? And this is a very important decision, because if it's an ESBL, you have to give a carbapenem. If it's not an ESBL, you can get away with amoxicillin. So, anyone, do you think this is an ESBL? You can unmute and let me know.
Sir, it is sensitive to piperacillin tazobactam and cefoperazone sulbactam. So it is not ESBL.
Okay, so let me tell you, that is not the marker that you see. Whenever you get this culture report, the marker for a ESBL is look at your third generation cephalosporins. If any one of them is resistant, cefotaxime, ceftriaxone, ceftazidime, if any of the third generation cephalosporin is resistant plus cefoxitin is sensitive, then it's ESBL. That's a very good surrogate marker. So this is an ESBL. Okay. So the marker is look at third generation cephalosporin and look at cefoxitin. If third generation is resistant or susceptible, this is pakka ESBL. And in that case, you don't give any cephalosporins, irrespective of their sensitivity. Then the drug of choice is carbapenem. You can give a piptazo or a Magnex, but only in patients who are not very sick. The recent guidelines say BLBLIs should only be used for lower UTIs or intra-abdominal infections caused by ESBLs, which are not very sick. Don't give a piptaz or a Magnex for a VAP, HAP, sepsis if the patient has ESBL. Drug of choice is carbapenem. Okay, so it's very important. Now, another catch in this, suppose third generation is resistant, cefoxitin is also resistant. Then it's an AMP-C. It's the elder brother of ESBL. What is the difference? In AMP-C, piptazo also will not work. Your only drug is carbapenem. So that's a minute difference between ESBL and AMP-C, and it's very important. Okay, another culture report. Suppose there is a patient with a bed sore wound, okay, in your hospital. We all suspect Staph aureus in that. You are 1 a.m. in the night, culture report comes. Is this MRSA or not? Again, a very important decision. If it's an MRSA, your drug of choice is Vanco. If it's not, you can give penicillin. So, anyone, is this an MRSA? Okay, the marker here is oxacillin or even cefoxitin. If oxacillin is resistant or cefoxitin is resistant, this is pakka MRSA. Staph aureus, resistant to methicillin. Okay, and if it's an MRSA, don't use any beta-lactam. Your drug of what are beta-lactams? PCMC, penicillin, cephalosporin, monobactam, carbapenem. Okay, don't give any PCMC if it's a MRSA. Your drug of his choice is Vanco, Tico, linezolid, depending on the site of infection. So that's why I'm saying these are all part of antibiotic stewardship. How to read a culture report? I sometimes take full 1 or 2 hour sessions with the clinicians. How to read culture report? Okay, so this is very important. To third important part, de-escalation. And I have framed this formula called D3. What is D3? De-escalation on day 3 requires 3 factors to take any of the 3 decisions. First, culture report is positive and sensitive. If your culture report is still negative on day 3, you can't de-escalate, right? Second, patient is clinically more stable on day 3 rather than as compared to day 1. And finally, guts. De-escalation is not for the faint-hearted, because the most common excuse of doctors is मुश्किल से तो meropenem काम करना शुरू किया है, अब आप कह रहे हो meropenem बंद कर. If your culture is positive, patient is doing well, and you are throwing patient with the broader spectrum antibiotics, this is the time to de-escalate. Come down on antibiotics. Okay, you don't kill mice with missiles. And if that is the case, do one of the 3. Shift from broad to narrow, reduce the number of antibiotics, and finally reduce the duration of it. Please mind you, don't use the dose of antibiotics. reducing the dose is not de-escalation, it's disaster unless patient is hepatically or renally. क्योंकि मैंने ये देखा है बहुत सारे डॉक्टर्स they do cost de-escalation. I am giving meropenem 500 mg 3 times a day. अब 5 दिन हो गए, let's make it 500 mg BD. I'm sorry, bacteria love low dose. Low dose is a recipe for resistance. Okay, so reducing the dose unnecessarily is not, it should not be done. And finally, stopping. Okay, for most cases, unless it's a Pseudomonas acinetobacter, patient is in a frank sepsis, you have to give 10 to 14 days. Now the overall term in the word is lesser, shorter, the better. Okay, there have been so many studies as 3 days in community acquired pneumonia are as good as 5 days. Okay, or 5 days are as good as 7 days. So I think it's very important that we stick to the duration of antibiotic. So what I call the new rule in critical care is the formula that we apply is Virender Sehwag formula. What is Virender Sehwag formula? In early, hit hard, out early. Okay. When you see a sepsis patient in the first hour, get in, give antibiotic, hit hard, give the highest dose possible. And then once you have the culture report, patient is doing well, out early, de-escalate, stop the antibiotics. Okay. So this is my first mantra for antibiotic stewardship today, that in early, hit hard, and out early. Okay. Okay. I'll just stop here because I know talking so much on antibiotics can get monotonous. So I'll just ask Dr. Shoaib Mukherjee if there are any questions, comments from the listeners, or we can move ahead. Sir, you are mute.
Yeah, I don't think I am receiving any comments. Shambhu, am I receiving any comments? I haven't seen them.
No, sir.
Okay.
There is no
Do you
further-
have them? So far, you don't. I have a question for you, Ankur.
Yeah.
What about empiric therapy? So you've been saying, emphasizing on, but if you go to practicing physicians and talk about, sending for culture and all of that, they will often come back saying that, you need to start early and empiric therapy. So any comments on that?
Absolutely. So, sir, when I say in early, I mean empirical starting empirical therapy, because you can't wait in sepsis for 48 hours to get the culture report, right? But the question is, what are the bases of starting empirical therapy? Okay, you don't throw the kitchen sink at every patient. Okay, and I'll come later to, there are very clear principles of starting empirical therapy. First is think global, act local. If you find a source of infection, are you dealing with a pneumonia, or a UTI, or an intra-abdominal? Then think of common pathogens in that particular infection and whether the patient has been shifted from a nursing home or has come straight from the community, right? I see so commonly young patient, for example, a young person, 26-year-old, had a road traffic accident, right? Had a head injury, is in ICU, they start meropenem. And I question that. He's a young patient, he's come to you with a head injury. What is the funda of giving empiric meropenem here, right? What are you covering for? Okay, so the principle of empiric therapy is, what are my most common likely pathogens? One. Second, what are the patient's comorbidities and risk factors? And third, what is growing in my hospital? In the last 6 months, what is the local data of my hospital saying? This is, antibiotics is all local, like asthma or myocardial infarction. You cannot chipkowify one flowchart in the doctor's room and everyone follow. No, you cannot even borrow from your neighboring hospital. That's why I'm saying it's a birthright for every physician to ask from the microbiologist, give me the antibiogram of the last 6 months. What is growing in my hospital? Tomorrow, if a patient comes with suspected pneumonia, I should know whether pneumonia in my hospital is caused by Pseudomonas, Klebsiella, Acinetobacter, and then my empirical antibiotic appropriate. Because 90% of the misuse of antibiotic happens in empiric, right? Because many people don't even send cultures. Or agar culture bhejte bhi hain 2 ml, 5 ml blood. It's a full science how much blood to send. You have to send at least 2 sets, 20 ml each. Now there are reports to say that the yield of blood culture is much better if you send more blood, right? So you asked the most pertinent question, because once you get the culture report, it's no longer science, it's mathematics then, right? The entire science of antibiotics is in the empirical choice.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that. In the rest of your lecture, are you going to talk about the core elements of antibiotic stewardship and things like that? Or should
Yes.
we keep it for a discussion later? Okay.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'll touch that in my press. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I see a comment
Okay.
from Bhaskar
So
here.
this is what IDSA says, 2 basic principles of approach. Sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Hello. Okay. Is there a question, sir, or should I go ahead?
I heard a question and I saw a comment from Bhaskar. Is there something somebody would like to ask? Please go ahead.
Very common observed double anaerobic cover. Oh, very good. I'm glad you asked this question because I'm going to cover that in what not to do. Is redundant coverage or double coverage? So please hold on. Yes, I saw this comment. Very right. And I'll talk about it. Okay. So quickly going to the 2 basic approaches. So this is what IDSA says. There is known as a front-end approach of stewardship and a back-end approach. What is front-end approach? At the time of prescribing, okay, you can restrict the formulary. You can pre-authorize the use so that not everyone has the access to write anything. There can be decision support system, guidelines, flowcharts, order sets. So all that can help you before you start an antibiotic is known as front-end approach. And then the next is the back-end approach when you have already prescribed. Now, how do you modify, change, optimize? Okay, that is based upon audit feedback, de-escalation, dose, and IV to oral conversion. So this is in a nutshell the overall 2 approaches of front-end and back-end in AMS. Now, why my slides are not moving ahead? Okay, AMS in resource limited setting. Read any Western paper on stewardship, nothing is possible in India. Okay, just any real world model that we have. What are the low hanging fruits? What can be done easily? What is doable and not ideal? And what are the 10 steps in implementing stewardship? So challenges, of course, we know we are all resource constrained. It's hardly, you will hardly find a hospital in India which will have an ID, clinical pharmacologist, epidemiologist all under one roof. So people have to double up. Okay. Hospital administration support is so critical, and I have really suffered with that. I know how difficult it is, especially in a private hospital, to convince the CEO that this will bring more footfall, this will bring more revenue to the hospital, because it's a different mindset. Okay, then you have to know, is there any existing data set? Is your microbiologist still collecting the data on paper? Is there any digitalization already there or not? And what is the overall stake of the different stakeholders in terms of your clinicians? And I always say, make one of the biggest clinicians in your hospital as the in charge, because sometimes I'm sorry to say that the most misuse comes from the hospital, from the department which is making the maximum money from the hospital. Okay, and I have seen this from practical quarters. So it's very important for someone influential to cheerlead this project. Otherwise, it will fall through cracks. Okay, so let's see that. Now, this is one thing we tried with the hospitals. Kyunki ye sabse tricky issue hai, because everyone thinks that we are entitled to write antibiotics. So when you withdraw that power of entitlement, it's not taken easily in India by the physicians. Okay. So we said, let's divide the antibiotics into 3 classes: restricted use, limited use, and unlimited access. What is restricted use? That you can give the first dose because patient is sick in the first 6 hours, but after that you have to take an authorization either from ID, microbiologist, pharmacologist, or whoever is the AMS committee. And what we proposed is, rather than putting your carbapenems, Vanco, Tico in this list, which are now used by everyone, let's put the highest antibiotics in this restricted use, which are colistin, linezolid, daptomycin, TG-sulbactam. So what I'm going to talk today is all practical things, nothing bookish, right? So make your highest end antibiotics as the restricted one. You still allow them to be used for the first dose because patient may be sick, and then people need to take the permissions. Next is limited access. What is limited access? Give access for first 2 to 3 days, but after 3 days, you have to justify why I'm continuing this. Okay, and the examples are carbapenems, vancomycin, teicoplanin. Okay, because invariably in 8 out of 10 patients in ICU, you will see these combinations. Okay, so you may allow for the first 48 hours, but then question why you are continuing. Okay. I love this paper from Marin Kolev. I think he's just summarized stewardship in one chart. So the top half is empirical, front end, the bottom half is targeted, back end. Okay. In empirical therapy, what is the first thing I have to know? Local microbiology data. First thing, last 6 months, last 3 months data from my hospital, which are the 5 most common pathogens in IAI, UTI, pneumonia, and all that. Second, patient risk stratification. Is my patient at risk of an MDR pathogen, multi-drug resistant pathogen? If a patient has been referred from a different hospital, if in the last 90 days he has consumed broad spectrum antibiotic, if he is a diabetic, immunocompromised, yes, he is at risk of an MDR. Okay, so these are the 2 most important factors to write to get your empirical therapy correct. And once you get the culture report, lab diagnosis, which is what does the culture report say, then you de-escalate, right? So one of the and this is the work that we guys did for 10 years, and this is the snapshot of how we helped hospitals make their own hospital data and convert it into a treatment guideline. And we divided 4 patient types. Patient type 1 is the one who has no risk factors. Patient type 2, who is the patient in the ward, he has some risk factors for some MDR. Patient type 3 is in the ICU, and patient type 4, even carbapenems are not working. So this is how we divided, and then we prescribed that patient type 1, limited use, broad spectrum antibiotics. Patient type 2, you can give piptazo. Type 3, you can give carbapenems, vanco. And type 4, maybe you have to give antifungals also. Okay. So this was one snapshot, and then we converted into a mobile app. I'll give you a snapshot. So this is the mobile app, and this was done in 100 hospitals, and many hospitals still use this app. So what do you do? So every hospital, every doctor gets an access to this app. They get their own OTP and their username password. Okay, one-time PIN. Then it will tell you whether your patient is type 1 or type 2. You have to select. Okay, and then it gives you what are the options from your hospital's protocol for that particular infection in type 1 or a type 2. Then you ask them what is the hospital ecology, most common pathogens. It tells you in the ward. So it's all your laboratory data is integrated into this app. Okay, and then you finally choose an antibiotic based upon that. So what was done manually was converted into mobile app, and these are this very common decision support systems. Okay, many companies are now providing digitalized solutions where the hospital EMR is put into the mobile app, which is dynamic. So the data is put into that. The laboratory also comes to that, and you can click of a button. You will know which are the most common pathogens and what should I write in my. Okay, so this is one working model which is working well in many of the hospitals. If you want to read more about AMS digitalization, I am providing some websites which are dedicated to this, or some Twitter handles. I encourage all of you to visit them. They'll give a lot of updated information on AMS. Okay. Coming to low-hanging fruit, and this is one of my favorite topics. Okay. How do you decide a criteria? If you're a small nursing home, you can't throw up your hand and say, no, it's not possible in my hand. You can still do something. So maybe you can pick, okay, I will only do stewardship for high cost drugs. Okay. Or maybe broad spectrum drugs, or drugs which have high narrow therapeutic margin. Okay. Double coverage of organisms. Dr. Bhaskar, your question, anaerobes, right? So pick, maybe if you pick just 1, 2, or 3 things, that's good enough. And I can show you this example. Like Fortis and Apollo, Netcare Hospitals is about 50 hospital, private hospital group in South Africa. Dr. Adrian Brink, who's the microbiologist there, he published this in Lancet. All they did was 4 small things. Whether cultures were performed prior to antibiotics or not. They just monitored that. Concurrent use of more than 4 antibiotics, duration of antibiotic more than 7 days, duration of antibiotic more than 14 days, and double cover. By just monitoring these 4 things, their overall antibiotic consumption was reduced by 30%, and they published it. Okay, so no restricted use, no pre-authorization, no high-flying European stuff. Just and South Africa has the same structure as India has, private hospitals, everyone doing their own thing. So just these 3 or 4 measures. You don't even need hospital CEO's permission for that. You can do your own department and create an island of excellence. Okay. And again, people are so scared. What should I measure? I say go small. You don't need to measure mortality in the first instance. Even if you can measure process outcomes, has my appropriateness drug improved? What is my compliance to guideline? Just you can measure consumption if you have DDD or DOT. Okay. Don't straight away go to showing mortality benefit. You can't show mortality benefit so easily, right? And then you say my program is not successful. Even reducing the days of ICU stay is difficult. It has to be done prospectively. But choose chewable, doable outcome measures. Start small. That's my message. Very quickly, 10 steps in setting up. Assess the program motivation. There has to be one cheerleader or a group of cheerleaders. Identify the most urgent, doable, low-hanging tasks. Start small. Okay. Define how you will track progress. It's very important to show success. Okay. Define implementation. Set short-term goals. Don't go for all at once. Divide responsibilities. Identify what additional resources you might need. Do you need to link your hospital EMR or hospital laboratory information systems? Can you take the help of an ICU nurse or a pharmacist? Please remind you, AMS is a multidisciplinary approach. No one person can do everything. So start identifying your team, and people have to develop responsibilities. Don't look for experts everywhere. Influence of external factors. In India, you have open ICUs. Okay, infection control is not uniform. Okay, how you trace outbreaks. So you have to kind of take into account all these factors. Establish frequency of monitoring. I'll say every 3 to 6 months is good enough. Okay, any program goes for more than 1 year without any audit does not help, because there will be seasonal variations, outbreaks. So keep 3 to 6 months as a frequency as checks and balances. Okay, establish reporting and networking system. Hospital administration is very important, because if you want to keep the program going, otherwise it will die down the moment you don't show any incremental benefit. And finally, market the program. Okay, it's very important to be a good spokesperson of your program. Tell the hospital CEO how it will increase the footfall, how you can create the whole patient safe module out of your stewardship program. Okay, so there are ways to market the program. So my whole idea is 4 Ds: right drug, right dose, duration, and de-escalation. Think global, act local. That's my overwhelming message. Okay. Now, very quickly, a case of how pharmacologists can play a very important role in terms of managing the dose. Let's see a practical case of extremely drug-resistant Pseudomonas. The definition by XDR Pseudomonas is which is resistant to carbapenems. The only drug which is susceptible is colistin. Okay, we know PK/PD of antibiotics. You all know time dependent and concentration. All beta-lactams are time dependent. All fluoroquinolones are concentration dependent. How do we optimize treatment? Time dependent, we give frequent doses, which is not practical. So we give prolonged infusions. Rather than giving a 30 minutes infusion, give a 2 to 3 hours infusion. And now we have published evidence to say that when you give carbapenems, give a 3-hour infusion, not 30 minutes infusion. Piptazo, 3 to 4 hours infusion. Okay. And similarly for aminoglycoside, single shot. Okay. So let's see this case. 60-year-old diabetic patient, history of hospital admission for UTA 30 days back, now in ICU with acute MI. Put on ventilator. Day 5, patient developed symptoms of VAP. Patient was empirically started on Piptazo, 4.5 grams in 30 minutes infusion, and levofloxacin 500 mg/d. My first question, do you think anything wrong in this prescription? What is wrong in this prescription? Anyone? This is a sick patient in ICU. We are suspecting a VAP, sepsis. So first, the dosage of Piptazo is wrong. It should be 3 to 4 hours infusion, not 30 minutes infusion. Second, dose of levofloxacin is wrong. It's a concentration dependent. So give 750 mg single shot, not 500 mg. So that's one thing which is wrong. Okay. So you send patients a lavage sample and blood cultures. 3 days later, culture shows Pseudomonas, which is XDR, resistant to everything except colistin. Now what you do? What will you do next? You are the clinical pharmacologist, they call you. What is your advice now? Anyone? I think the first advice is to the microbiologist, sir or ma'am, please don't give me only SI or R. Give me the actual MICs. Now, this is a very important concept for all micro and pharmacologists. Okay, we have to choose an antibiotic. All are resistant, we know, but the one which is closest to its resistant breakpoint. For carbapenem, the resistant breakpoint is 4 for Pseudomonas, right? Because we know we can't give colistin alone. It develops resistance very fast. So I have to add something to colistin that will be based upon the MIC. So the first thing you do is ask for MICs. Because we know this is a very good paper which says if the carbapenem MICs are less than 8, you can still use them in high dose prolonged infusion along with colistin. Okay, so in this patient, see what happens if you give a 30 minutes infusion. This is the time above MIC for meropenem. But the same drug given in 3-hour infusion has a longer time above MIC, which means more clinical efficacy. Okay. Similarly, colistin, I think we have damaged colistin by giving wrong dose. This is such a lovely graph. See, the MIC is 2. If you give 2 grams 3 times a day, which 2 million units 3 times a day, which most of the doctors give, it reaches a steady state only after 48 to 72 hours. For first 48 hours, colistin is a placebo. Bacteria is tasting it, enjoying it, becoming resistant. The right dose for colistin is a loading dose of 9 to 12 million, followed by 4.5 million PD. And this only a pharmacologist can tell you. Okay, so this is very important to identify our role as pharmacologists in stewardship. Okay, so it looks a very simple case of XDR Pseudomonas. Start colistin. No, you have to give colistin in the right dose and add a carbapenem which is closest to its breakpoint in the right possible dose. Okay? That is how stewardship works in an ICU. Okay, so I always say PK/PD makes good drugs look better. It's the same drug, but if you give in an appropriate dose and duration, it looks better. Final 3 slides. What are my antibiotic commandments? First of all, I was so glad that the government of India 3 years ago banned more than 6,000 FDCs. India is a country. Can you imagine there was a combination in the market of ceftriaxone, vancomycin, and metronidazole all in one injection? And I was aghast how, because one for gram positive, one for gram negative, one for anaerobe. Many microbiologists called worldwide, there are only 5 BLIs approved: piptazo, cefosulbactam, amsulbactam, ampicillbactam, and ticarclav. We have 25: cefopodoxime plus clavulanic, cefexime plus sulbactam. Ek 4 times a day hai, once a day hai, phir bhi jod rahe hain. I don't know how these are approved. So these are just, I'm pointing out list of the drugs which were banned. So my first humble request to anyone who's in the management in the hospital is, अगर आप stewardship में कुछ भी नहीं कर सकते, ये minimum है जो आप कर सकते, कि at least जो irrational combinations हैं, they should not be in my formula. That's the lowest hanging fruit you can do. And finally, my ceftriaxone and levofloxacin are not small antibiotics. Please, we have to change our terminology. क्या छोटा है, क्या बड़ा है. Learn to say no to vancomycin. This is one of the guidance from CDC. क्योंकि हमें लगता है Staph aureus is equal to vancomycin. I'm sorry, if it's a normal Staph aureus, vanco is a bad drug. Vanco only works for an MRSA. Okay? So as they say, fever is not a sign of ceftriaxone deficiency, right? So similarly, every fever does not need an antibiotic. Okay? Don't use vanco for sensitive staph. Avoid bacteriostatic drugs in immunocompromised patients, right? Because you don't have scavengers there to kill these, inhibit these bacteria. Piptazo and carbapenems as good as monotherapy. If you are suspecting a mixed infection like AI, IAI or SSTI, जहाँ anaerobes भी possible हैं, why we give Metrogyl? Metrogyl तो पानी बन गया. Metrogyl हर patient को मिलना ही मिलना है जो admit हो गया. Other patient is on carbapenem and piptazo, all we are suspecting is a B fragilis. That's the only anaerobe we are suspecting. वो ये cover करते हैं दोनों. You don't need to add Metrogyl or a clindamycin to cover anaerobes. Avoid giving 2 beta-lactams together. VIPs don't need 6 antibiotics. Okay. Patient is on piptazo also, carbapenem also. Nuisance value. Both work on beta, both work on cell wall synthesis inhibition. If you have to combine two drugs, never give two drugs of the same class or the same MOA. Okay, give different MOAs. Beware of irrational, I have told this. Antibiotics should not cover up for an absent infection control. ये बड़ा ही कॉमन बहाना है, कई सर्जन्स बनाते हैं कि भाई हमें देने पड़ेंगे 3 एंटीबायोटिक क्योंकि हमारा इन्फेक्शन कंट्रोल अच्छा नहीं. I am sorry, this is a wrong argument, right? You have to get your infection control in order. Let's adopt a culture of sending more cultures. It is so easy to blame the microbiologist. मैडम कल्चर तो कभी पॉजिटिव आता ही नहीं. अगर आप 2 ml 5 ml ब्लड भेजेंगे कभी पॉजिटिव नहीं आएगा. Okay? What is the right amount of blood to be sent? Trust the microbiologist. Local data is supreme, right? This is such a futile excuse when many physicians give, I don't trust my local data. If you don't trust your local data, then better don't send the sample. आप पेशेंट का 1500 रुपए क्यों खराब कर रहे हो ब्लड कल्चर? अगर आपको इस कल्चर रिपोर्ट पे एक्ट ही नहीं करना, why send the culture? And I always say golden rule is some data is better than no data. Okay, so don't look for perfection here. Risk stratify patients. Not every patient needs a king Congo penem or a gorilla mycin. बड़ा है तो बेहतर है. No, right? If a patient is not at risk of MDRs, give shorter drugs, smaller drugs. And finally, winning horses can be changed. Please de-escalate. Right? Don't kill mice with missiles. Okay, so I end by saying, if implemented properly, yes, antibiotic stewardship can be the aspirin of 21st century. Thank you so much for your patient hearing. Happy to take any questions, comments.
Thank you, Ankur. It was really, really good to listen to all of this. And it's quite a lot of, one doesn't realize that there is so much to learn in this area of antibiotic use. And we merely scratch the surface when we actually, just read about the antibiotics themselves, but not about how to properly use them. And in my opinion, this lecture that you gave for an hour needs to be broken up into, an entire module of maybe 5 or 6 lectures. And different aspects of this need to be, people need to be educated on. So yeah, thanks a lot for this presentation. It was really enlightening. And I open up the floor for questions from the listeners. They're already saying it's gold for us, and please provide the slides.
Sir, actually, I take this is actually 1 week's job. So this is a workshop actually, which is broken down into first is microbiology, then pharmacology, then risk study, because de-escalation itself is a 1-hour lecture. Risk stratification is a 1-hour lecture. So yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, any questions? Any technical questions here?
I see, does dose adjustment comes under the purview of stewardship? Absolutely, it comes under the purview of stewardship, right? Because I urge all clinical pharmacologists who are placed in hospitals to do morning rounds, right? And then see which drugs dosages are given in the wrong way. If patient is not hepatically and renally compromised, why should low doses be given? And the golden rule is, if a patient is in sepsis, the first 24 hours give highest possible dose. Patient is in a hyperdynamic state, right? He will develop anuria, oliguria only on 3-4 days, then reduce the dose. But agar aap shuru mein hi kam dose denge, it will never reach its steady state. Okay, so yes, dose is definitely comes under the purview of stewardship. Please provide me. Okay, wonderful. Okay, role of TDM. Yes, therapeutic drug monitoring. Now, I think the role of TDM is more now in antifungals, actually, when we come to azoles and other things. In antibiotics, we know aminoglycosides and some things, but not every hospital provides the TDM facilities. So my humble suggestion is, even if we, rather than going into technicalities of TDM, if we can just find out our 2 or 3 low-hanging fruits, I think that's good enough. Start from something which is smaller and less technical. Is it always mandatory to use other antibiotic when using colistin? The answer is yes. Because first of all, you will not use colistin for a normal patient. You will use colistin only if it's a carbapenem resistant bug, right? If it's a carbapenem resistant bug, colistin works like a detergent, surfactant, but it's not a new antibiotic. 1969 में आया था ये, फिर हम भूल गए इसको.
it acquires resistance very fast. So it's very important to combine colistin either with a carbapenem or with a sulbactam if it's an Acinetobacter, or with a fosfomycin. Again, that's a totally different lecture on how to manage MDR, XDR. But एक बात पक्की है, कोलिस्टिन को अकेले मत देना कभी भी. अगर अकेले आपको लगे कि और कुछ नहीं देना ही है, तो हाईएस्ट पॉसिबल डोज में जो बोला उसमें देना है, कम डोज में नहीं देना. Okay. Is there any role for TDM for colistin? We still do not know the exact PK/PD of colistin. कुछ कहते हैं time dependent, कुछ कहते हैं concentration dependent. So rather than looking at a TDM, जो मैंने आपको ग्राफ दिखाया वो आप मान के चलो that if you give less than 6 million units per day, its steady state will not be achieved in the first 48 hours. तो आप ये मान के चलो, rather than TDM वो ग्राफ हमें बता रहा है कि अगर आप 12 million loading dose दोगे तभी in the first 6 hours it will recross the MIC barrier. Sir, for logistic reasons, culture will be sent late after starting antibiotics. Empirically, an antibiogram shows not many susceptible organisms. In such a scenario, doctors think there are only resistant strains and give high an antibiotic. This is, the hamster wheel question. What to start first. So, pehli baat, if you have already started antibiotics or aapne culture nahi bheja, so that's wrong. But okay, chalo, the horse has bolted. What to do? Then send the culture when the next dose is due, just before that, because the trough concentration hogi, uska effect minimal hoga in body. Okay, that is one. Second, yes, if you are sending only samples after sending culture report and everything, then the antibiogram will show very resistant pathogens. So antibiogram has to be taken with a pinch of salt. Never forget your patient. Don't treat culture reports. Okay, if your patient is coming straight from community, young बच्चा है, कोई resistant factor नहीं है, तो culture report या मेरा antibiogram कुछ भी कहता रहे, right? So it's a very fine, it's not only mathematics, it's an art. Okay, so yes, antibiogram is essential, but I normally take a workshop on how to make an antibiogram. There is a CLSI guidelines on how to make an antibiogram. Repeat samples नहीं लेने, एक patient का दोबारा sample नहीं होना चाहिए, वो सब चीजें. So I think the microbiologist has to be taught how to make an antibiogram. Sir, is every drug should be done with PK/PD? Most of the drugs, yes. Now we have classification, which are time, which are concentration dependent. Okay. और डॉक्टर को प्लीज क्लिनिशियन को ये मत बताइए कि ये टाइम है, ये कॉन्सेंट्रेशन है. उनको लगेगा ये थ्योरेटिकल है. उनको बताइए प्रैक्टिकली बेड साइड पे क्या करना है. ओके, कौन सी ड्रग को प्रोलॉन्ग्ड इन्फ्यूजन में देना है, कौन सी को सिंगल डोज हाईएस्ट डोज में देना है. MIC 1 and 4 which is better? I'm sorry, ये सही क्वेश्चन नहीं है, because MIC will depend upon the break point of that antibiotic. अब जैसे पिप्टाजो का ब्रेक पॉइंट 16 है, तो उसमें 16 भी अच्छा है, राइट? कार्बापेनम का ब्रेक पॉइंट 1 है, तो उसमें 1 भी बुरा है. ओके, सो यू हैव टू नो द ब्रेक पॉइंट्स, एंड आई अर्ज ऑल द क्लिनिशियंस कि आपके डॉक्टर्स ड्यूटी रूम में आपको भूल जाता है MIC ब्रेक पॉइंट्स क्या है. आपके ब्रेक पॉइंट लगे होने चाहिए अपने ड्यूटी रूम में फॉर कॉमनली एंटीबायोटिक्स के उनके सेंसिटिविटी ब्रेक पॉइंट्स क्या है. Even if patient is renally compromised, there is a general tendency to reduce the dose as per EGFR, which could be detrimental. Exactly, this is what I said. This is known as augmented renal clearance, ARC, in the first 48 hours. जितना आप एंटीबायोटिक कम देंगे, patient is already peeing that blood, peeing that urine. Okay, so first 48 hours में high dose दीजिए. Okay, because EGFR high है, hyperdynamic state. Break point of MIC means what? Okay, simple question. Okay, मान लीजिए हम कहते हैं कि अगर आप इस हाईवे पे मोर देन 60 किलोमीटर पर आवर की स्पीड से चलाएंगे तो आपका चालान होगा. तो 60 किलोमीटर पर आवर becomes my break point. Okay. Similarly, for antibiotics, we will say the break point is 2, which means if the concentration of the drug is at least 2, only then the drug will work. If it is more than 2, what is the resistance? Resistance मतलब drug का MIC बढ़ता जाता है. जो बैक्टीरिया पहले 2 माइक्रोग्राम से मर जाता था, अब उसको 4 माइक्रोग्राम लग रहा है. This is what is known as resistance. Okay, so we have to know the break points. Break points are the guidelines made by the CLSI, which is a American body. For every drug there is a break point, and उससे हम tally करते हैं कि culture report में जो MIC आई. How to interpret I in antibiogram? Very good question. So I intermediate is also known as dose dependent. Now the new definition of I is SDD, susceptible dose dependent. I का simple इतना मतलब है कि जो normal dose है उसमें ये drug काम नहीं करेगी. So if you want to give a drug which is showing I in the culture report, give its highest possible dose. Only then it will work, otherwise it will not. So these were some of the questions, Shoaib sir.
Great. Thanks for those answers. Very pertinent ones. I have a very general question for you. So you've interacted with so many clinicians and hospitals in the country. What do you think is the status of antibiotic stewardship in Indian hospitals?
Sir, it started with a lot of fanfare, and I have to say that the impetus was again from pharma industry. Okay, I remember how much I have myself taken 200 CMEs only on stewardship in different hospitals. But what I can tell you is that there is a lot of stewardship on paper, but by the bedside, it somehow gets diluted. Because in private hospitals, there is not much incentive. The medical superintendents, the CEOs of the hospital don't think it's a money catching, patient catching, footfall increasing exercise. And then it's very difficult to antagonize your main doctors in the hospital sometimes. In government hospitals, the problem is resource constraint, right? So I will say Fortis Hospital started it for some years, but I told them at that time also, when you start publish it, right? Others get motivated that yes, you can do something. But Indians, we have bad habit of not publishing what we do, okay, not documenting what we do. So I will say, अगर आप इंडिया के किसी भी हॉस्पिटल के आईसीयू का डेटा देख लेंगे, you will hope कि मैं इस हॉस्पिटल में ना एडमिट हूं कभी. Okay, so I'm not scaremongering. I can tell you this is a situation in our ICU. It's really bad, and I don't know. Government of India ने भी stewardship बोला है जरूरी है, but I am not very sure if this is happening on the ground, sir. Because people do not know the low. I think it's very important to do the lowest hanging fruits. सिर्फ दो चीजें करें, अच्छे से करें.
Chiranjeev has another question for you.
हाँ जी, एक उससे ऊपर क्वेश्चन था. Can amoxi be used in UTI with good MIC breakpoint when ESBL? Tricky question, sir. By definition, ESBL है तो amoxi काम नहीं करेगा, right? लेकिन we know amoxi की penetration urinary tract में बहुत ज्यादा है.
बहुत ज्यादा.
तो मैं ये कहूंगा, अगर lower UTI है, cystitis है, then you may think of amoxi. I will still say give amoxiclav at least in that case, rather than giving amoxi, क्योंकि clav कुछ ना कुछ तो बीटा लैक्टेमेज से बचाएगा, राइट? और एक बहुत अच्छी ड्रग है नाइट्रोफिरनटोइन, जो लोअर यूटीआई में ESBL में काम करती है. दैट इज देयर आर ओनली 2 oral drugs which can be given for ESBL UTI, नाइट्रोफिरनटोइन, फॉस्फोमाइसिन. उसका इस्तेमाल आप कर सकते हैं लोअर यूटीआई में. ओके, नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन. If I can choose some other drug for same which is sensitive, yes, I have told you for lower UTI, ESBL, nitrofurantoin, fosfomycin. Okay, अगर pyelonephritis हो चुका है, then you have to give peptazone. Okay, can amoxi be used in prostatitis or PID with good MIC breakpoint when in ESBL is present? Again, the same question. For ESBL, I will not give amoxi, क्योंकि एक तो prostatitis, eyes, prostate, ये सबसे डिफिकल्ट टू पेनिट्रेट ऑर्गन्स हैं एंटीबायोटिक्स के लिए, राइट? और इसमें अच्छे से कौन घुसता है? फ्लोरोक्विनोलोन्स. इसमें से अच्छे से कौन? आपके इंट्रासेलुलर एंटीबायोटिक्स अच्छे घुसेंगे, राइट? तो आपके मैक्रोलाइड्स अच्छे घुसेंगे, राइट? सो फॉर प्रोस्टेटाइटिस आई विल प्रेफर ए फ्लोरोक्विनोलोन और ए कार्बापेनम रादर देन एन अमॉक्सी फॉर एन ESBL. फॉर ए नॉन ESBL, यस, क्योंकि PID गायनी में बड़ी कॉमन प्रॉब्लम है, राइट? उसमें आप अमॉक्सी प्लस मेट्रोजिल देते हैं. Any more questions?
Well, then we've had a wonderful session. Many things to learn here. How do we, one lecture I think is not sufficient for people to, get. So do you have any suggestions, Ankur, of where people can comprehensively learn on antibiotic stewardship, how antibiotics should be used? Is there a book or a website that one can go to? Not those websites which tell you, how you should do it in your hospital, but the very practical things that you talked about, which are, the core of antibiotic usage.
Sir, I'm afraid there is क्योंकि ये जो मैंने प्रेजेंट किया ये पूरे 10 साल का निचोड़ है that we work, you
बिल्कुल,
know,
वो तो समझ में आ रहा है।
of working in the field. क्योंकि I could have easily shown you the idea as a guideline कि भाई ये है stewardship. Then it becomes very didactic कुछ उसमें, right? But I would still suggest go to SIDRAP site. मैंने जो एक स्लाइड में मैंने डिजिटल टूल्स दिए हैं, SIDRAP is a good site for stewardship dedicated to that. Okay, follow some Twitter handles by Dr. Deborah Goff, Adrian Brink. They are very active on Twitter and they keep on updating everything. And I am happy to share all the material that I have. None is copyright, nothing like that. Because this is all very, you know, they say learning on the ground, very Indian scenario ke liye.
Right.
Yeah, and I wanted to publish an article also on this, but you know, other things. But I am happy to share my knowledge on this or whatever I have. I don't know of any Indian source or anyone from India who's published the practical aspects. Okay, although there are champions of stewardship in India, the biggest one is Dr. VRS from Apollo Chennai, Dr. Abdul Ghafoor. He is in the Government of India Committee of Stewardship. उन्होंने Chennai Declaration भी, if you know, Chennai Declaration was published 3 years ago. That was the Indian version of stewardship. But मुझे लगा कि वो भी फिर भी थोड़ा सा ना helicopter view है. We have to get to the ground and you know daily practical problems क्या हैं. जहाँ microbiologist भी नहीं है hospital में, वहाँ कैसे करना है stewardship? 10 बेड के nursing home stewardship कैसे करना है? You know, that is what India needs.
And is there any scope for collaboration between microbiologists and clinical pharmacologists to come together and kind of champion this?
Sir, 100%. This is the only way to do stewardship. इंडिया में 60 आईडी हैं, 70 आईडी फिजिशियन होंगे और उसमें से 50 साउथ में है. नॉर्थ में तो हार्डली देयर आर हार्डली एनी आईडी फिजिशियंस, राइट? सो जब तक मैं कर रहा था तब तक तो आईडी बिल्कुल नहीं था, तो फिर भी आ गए इक्का दुक्का नॉर्थ. सो हमारे स्टीवर्डशिप को तो लीड ही इन 2 लोगों ने किया, क्लिनिकल फार्मासिस्ट एंड माइक्रोबायोलॉजिस्ट, विद ब्लेसिंग्स ऑफ समवन फ्रॉम आईसीयू. सो I strongly suggest clinical pharmacologists should raise their hand and say, yes, we will lead this, right? And I will say, be ready to own the rights before asking for responsibilities. Please, you have to do the morning rounds and evening rounds. You have to be ready for that. अगर आप सिर्फ 9 to 5 की ड्यूटी करेंगे और फिर कहेंगे क्लीनिशियन मेरी बात सुन ले, फिर नहीं सुन, राइट? तो दैट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कि हाँ जी, बिकॉज डॉक्टर्स किस बात से डरते हैं कि आप तो भी सजेशन देके चले जाओगे, कल को रिलेटिव्स को मुझे फेस करना. सो अनलेस यू ओन अप द पेशेंट, दे विल नॉट लिसन टू यू.
Absolutely. So I suppose that brings us to the end of this session. Ankur, I can't thank you enough for making time for this. And I will now hand over back to the organizers. Shambhu or Bhaskar, would you like to make some closing comments?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Shoaibal, for an excellent moderation of the session. And thank you, Dr. Ankur, for such an excellent presentation. Definitely, we would like to learn more about this topic, and we would read whatever material that you have suggested. And of course, if there is any other queries or anything to be asked for, I hope we can contact you in the future.
Absolutely, Bhaskar. I have a training module with me, which is a 7-day training module. Okay.
Okay.
And I can share that with you. So these are modules as per the subject: micro, pharma, PKPD, risk, de-escalation, like that. Okay. We can do that. I can share that. Plus one, I have a crash course. You know, someone 3 hours crash course. 3 घंटे में सब मोटा-मोटा क्या जानना है. So I have those also in slides. So I'm happy to share those.
Sure, sir. Sure, definitely.
Can you repeat the Twitter handles, Ankur?
Sir, वो slide में है मेरे.
अच्छा.
One of the slides has that.
Okay. So Shambhu, are we going to get these slides? At least those who want to have those slides.
Yeah. So these are Twitter handles. Yeah, sure. Please, these are no copyright. I have taken permission from my company also. That's why I have not put in the title slide that I belong to a company. I've just put a pharmacologist. So I'm happy to share these slides.
And we will also be providing the link for the video, the recording that we have done. So we can go through that also.
Great. And I must thank, the organizers here, Shambhu, yourself, and Bhaskar, and everybody else behind this. thinking of this topic, bringing Ankur to speak to us. It has been really wonderful, and
Thank you so much, sir. It's my pleasure. Pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
okay then. Can we log off now?
Yeah.
Good night. Good night. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
sir, once
Bye.
again. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.